Hello, hello. You caught me looking over at my screen, folks. How are you? Happy Wednesday. Today is Wednesday, November 10th, 2021. It is 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Thank you for joining us. And I am noticing on the video stream that my audio and video seem to be a little bit out of sync. So let me just attempt to see if I have a setting where I can get that to sync up. It may not be possible, or I'll switch cameras. Here, la, 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 la. That camera is giving it to you in sync, isn't it? Look at that, people. All right, let's jump to my other camera. Oh, now we're in sync. We'll see if it stays in sync. Well, folks, today is, it's going to be a lot of fun for many reasons. One reason is that I get to have on the show a longtime friend of mine and industry veteran, and this individual was actually a customer of mine back when I was at Lutron, and then when I was at Crestron, and so our relationship actually goes back 20 years. And what's also really fun is that this individual was also one of the few people that when I was launching my business in 2007, and I went out and I did a friends and family round of fundraising to start that business. And he actually helped me out and gave me a loan to start the business. And it was pretty amazing. And, you know, at the end of the day, when you start something like that, all you want to know is that somebody believes in you and is willing to bet on you. And he did that. And I'm proud to say I remember, you know, early years of any business or a struggle, but I remember how proud I was when I was able to pay back that loan with interest and give him his final payment. It was a big deal for me. It was like a moral win. So this individual, this is Theo Tsavoussis. And I've known Theo for many years. He's down in the Bahamas. He runs a business called Prometheus Systems. He is an integrator. He is one of you. And he also happens to have a hobby similar to my hobby. In fact, I think it's been his hobby longer than it's been my hobby, and that is cryptocurrencies. So I am going to read, my lawyer has advised, because of what Theo and I are going to be talking about, I have a lot of legalese that I'm going to have to read to you here live. And I'm also going to record this special for the audio podcast version as well. So just bear with me. But due to the nature of the conversation that we're going to have, this is what I need to say. So I'm going to say the information on this show, Automation Unplugged, is provided for educational, informational, and entertainment purposes only, without any express or implied warranty of any kind, including warranties of accuracy, completeness, or fitness for any particular purpose. The information contained in or provided or through this video stream or podcast is not intended to be and does not constitute financial advice, investment advice, trading advice, or frankly, any other advice. The information provided during this show and on our website is general in nature and is not specific to you, the user, or anyone else. You should not take any decision, financial investment, trading, or otherwise based on any of the information presented on this show or on our website without undertaking an independent due diligence and consultation with a professional broker or financial advisor. You understand that you are using any and all of the information available on or through this show and on our website at your own risk. Trading of Bitcoins and alternative cryptocurrencies has potential rewards, and it also has potential risks involved. Trading may not be suitable for all people. Anyone wishing to invest should seek his or her own independent financial or professional advice. There you go. That was a mouthful. So without further ado, let's bring in my friend Theo. Theo, how are you, sir?
I'm great, Ron. How you doing?
I am good. I have a special image here. Let me go to this view, and I'm going to bring this in. There we go. There you are, Theo. You were visiting my CEDIA booth, Firefly Design Group, back in September of 2009. That would have been 2 years after I launched the business. Do you remember that?
I certainly do. That was a long time ago.
That was, and there's me. I'm not sure why I have the medical gloves, but I've got medical gloves going on there. I don't know. I was doing something there. So Theo, first of all, where are you coming to us from?
Well, I'm in the Bahamas. I'm in my house, and I'm enjoying a beautiful, sunny, warm day here in the Bahamas in Nassau.
That wouldn't have anything to do with Bitcoin and Ethereum reaching all-time highs in the last hour, would it?
That is just a wonderful coincidence. I could sit here and speak with you and your audience about cryptocurrencies as the market hits all-time highs.
The coincidence, you and I have been talking for years about crypto, and we've stayed in touch on that subject, and here you are on our show live. What are the odds?
Absolutely. Awesome.
It's pretty amazing.
Really awesome.
All right. Prometheus Systems. What is Prometheus Systems? Where do you guys do work? What type of projects do you guys do?
Well, we, first of all, I got started way back, like 1997 is when I first convinced someone to buy an automation system from me. And we focus on really high-end residential. And so, it's gated communities. The average size house is like, well, I mean, for many of you guys, this is no big deal, but the average size house is maybe 15,000 square feet. I'm doing a house right now that's 40,000 square feet. So really focus on upscale residential.
Upscale, do you primarily, have you stayed focused in the Bahamas, or do you work throughout the Caribbean, or where's when you've done, and I know you've been doing these projects for, like you said, since the late 90s, where do you primarily do the work?
Primarily the work is right here in Nassau, but I have projects on the islands, including small boutique hotels that we've done. And I've done projects as far south as Chile and as far north as Montreal. Haven't done anything in Europe, but I've done a number of projects in the Caribbean itself.
Can you take us back in time? How did you get into the integration space?
Okay, so my background is technical. I also have a degree in business, but I had a company back in '95. Well, I was a partner in a company where we put up satellite dishes, and in the early days, it was the big dishes before DirecTV came up. But we were putting in this this big dish at some huge house, and this was in '95. And I walked in, and there were these guys from LA, and they were putting keypads in the walls and doing a home theater. And so I said, guys, what are you doing? And they said, well, we're doing home automation. This is a lighting control system. We've got audio everywhere, video everywhere, and a home theater. And I looked at it and it was as if a light came on. I said, "This is what I'm doing next."
Would that have been a
And
Lutron system?
to be honest with you, it wasn't. I think it was Vantage
A Vantage
at the
system.
time. Yeah, it was Vantage that they were putting in. It wasn't Lutron. So yeah, that's why actually I went and I didn't know any better. I didn't know anything. I just went and got trained at Vantage, and I started selling Vantage systems for. I think like the first 5 or 6 projects I did were Vantage, and then I switched over to Lutron. Everything else has been Lutron ever since.
Got it. And how has your business evolved over those 25 years?
Um, I mean, it's been really good in terms of getting larger and larger projects, and getting to the point where it becomes really straightforward. There isn't, there's not really uh, much in terms of challenge anymore with putting in systems. And I've come to the point where I'm thinking of moving on.
Yeah, we're going to get to that. What led to you deciding to be generous back in 2007 and lend me money to start Firefly Design Group? What were you thinking?
Well, I thought you were nuts, but
You're definitely right there.
but I also thought if anyone can do this, it's Ron, because he doesn't quit. And so I thought, I was like 99% sure at the very least you'd pay me back with interest. So I wasn't worried about it. I wasn't sure about your long-term viability, but I thought for sure you would give it your best go, and so I had no problem extending you that loan.
Was it memorable for you when I did finally pay you back? I don't remember what year that was. I don't recall how many years it took. Does that stick with you? Do you remember when that happened, or was it too little to be memorable?
No, I remember it because it registered in my mind as, by damn, Ron did it. He paid me back, which is what I fully expected. And I believe, if I'm not wrong, it might have been 2010, but I'd have to check that. I'm not sure.
Yeah, that could be right. That could be right.
Yeah.
So to bring us to the, I'm not going to say the present, but what I recall is maybe in 2016, and you give us your background. When did you hear about Bitcoin? Because what I think I know is that in 16 you made an investment. Were you involved in it before then?
Oh yeah.
Oh, you were. All right. Tell us when did you hear? When did you have the twinkle in your eye of this white paper on this thing called Bitcoin?
So I came across Bitcoin in the form of Satoshi Nakamoto's white paper in 2011. Yep, 2011.
Okay.
And so I decided, hey, this looks like at the very least is going to be fun. So I built a rig with big graphics cards and big AMDs at the time, and started mining Bitcoin in June of 2011. And
what the podcast audience doesn't hear is my jaw dropped. I'm picking it up off the table that you were mining in June of 11.
Yep, absolutely. Bitcoin was $2 at the time. And so I started mining it, but I had a problem. And the problem was that, I mean, the Bitcoin algorithm is so GPU intensive that you could fry eggs on these graphics cards. So they would constantly shut down in an air-conditioned room. And so my brothers, they own the Wendy's franchise here in the Bahamas, and they've got big walk-in coolers. And so I asked them if I could move my mining operation into one of their coolers. And I plugged it in, and it ran for a year and a half. And so I was mining Bitcoin for a year and a half before I calculated that the computer I was running would not be able to mine another Bitcoin, even if I let it run to the end of time, simply because the size of the Bitcoin mining network had become so large. My contribution was so minuscule a year and a half into it that I'd never mine another Bitcoin. So I shut it down.
Your hashing power was not adequate to mine a Bitcoin.
Correct. And just so everybody knows, a hash is one iteration through the Bitcoin algorithm. So the Bitcoin algorithm is about 1,500 instructions. So one hash is the 1,500 instructions that executes one round of looking for the answer within the Bitcoin mining network. So yeah, my hash power was no longer high enough for me to get anywhere. I shut it down.
We're going to come back to this idea that you were mining in 11, which that is astounding. I see Taylor here. Taylor is our VP of operations and finance, and his answer is simply, wow. That's you're definitely an OG if you're mining in 11. But for our audience, we have a lot of newbies for sure listening. What is a Bitcoin?
Yeah, so Bitcoin is a very interesting concept. It is really the very first time that we've had a form of money that's not issued by a king or an emperor or a government or some central bank, some central authority. It is a democratized way of creating and issuing money, at the very least. It is also, because it's electronic, what is popularly called the Internet of Money. And so it's very interesting that it exists on a ledger called a blockchain that exists on all computers that are running the Bitcoin mining algorithm, if they're actively participating in Bitcoin mining, or just a node that verifies transactions more in a participatory way, rather than being a full mining network. And so you can run a verification node with a lot less horsepower than someone who is actually mining.
So there's a hip term, and I'm going to come back to Bitcoin, and I'm going to jump into mining of Bitcoin and get an explanation. But I think there could be an opportunity here to teach, and I'm going to I'm going to empower you to do that. And that is, a Bitcoin is fungible, meaning that a Bitcoin, you can give me a Bitcoin, I can take your Bitcoin, you can give me, we can exchange Bitcoins, and we have equal value of a Bitcoin. And so that's a fungible token. And there's something called a non-fungible token. And it's all the rage. People are seeing it on CNBC, and it's being talked about across the internet. and this thing called an NFT, a non-fungible token. Can you maybe use Bitcoin and as the foundation, and then how is an NFT different, and where maybe is it applied today, and where might it be applied in the future?
Yeah. So fungibility is the nature of money. $1 is the same as another dollar. This was actually challenged, and I don't remember what date it was, but it was, I don't know, some time ago. But it was challenged in the US courts because um, a certain person had copied the serial numbers of the bills, the dollar bills they had in their possession. I don't know what possessed them to do that, but they were robbed. And um, the the thief actually spent that money in some stores or whatever it was. And what happened was that this individual took the store to court to try and get his dollars back because he could prove from the serial number that they were his. And the court ruled against him because they said the dollar is fungible. It doesn't matter as long as the person who ends up with the dollar has not broken the law in any way. Um, that money is equivalent to any other dollar, and so $1 is the same as another, and that was shown in law. Similarly, one Bitcoin is the same as another. Not entirely, but that's the idea. So now that's fungibility, where one is equivalent to the other. Non-fungibility is where one token, whatever that is different from another token that that they represent two different things. And so non-fungible tokens don't exist directly on the Bitcoin network, but on other networks that support what are called layer 2 solutions, which are programs that run on top of the foundation layer. They have minted non-fungible tokens that represent art, music, real estate. I mean, it's phenomenal. The artistic side of it is such that you can program a smart contract. I mean, and you've seen NFTs explode recently. Everyone's getting into them, and they have the reason that they're valuable is you can prove that you own it because you have a private key that nobody else has that proves your ownership. You can publish a message on that NFT that shows you own it. And you could not sell it unless you had that private key. So you would transfer ownership from you to another person. Now, the thing is that NFTs are really just smart contracts that can be bought, sold, whatever you wish. But what's interesting about them is that, say you're an artist, you can program an NFT with an image that you've created that people love and are willing to pay for, and someone buys it. But in the programming, baked right into the smart contract, anytime that NFT changes hands, anytime it's sold, you can program it so that 10% or whatever percentage you decide is transferred to you of the sale price as the artist, as the original artist. And so you make money in perpetuity every time that art piece changes hands.
So
And so, yeah.
I was gonna go. I'm old enough to have experienced in the mid '90s the invention of a music compression technology called MP3.
Yeah.
And things like Napster were born, and the transmission of music around I remember because me and my dorm buddies would head over across campus at Virginia Tech to the one kid on campus that had a DVD, it was a CD burner. And we would pay him a handsome ransom to burn our music onto the CD. It was like $50 a CD so that we could have this portable music. And what it meant ultimately was that the artists were not getting paid because people weren't necessarily going to the store and buying the DVD or the CD for that artist. And it caused a lot of destruction to the music industry, as an example. And these new technologies, and tell me if this is correct or your version of this, and we'll get back into smart contracts and thus Ethereum. But smart contracts and NFTs actually change the game entirely. Do you agree
Correct.
with that? That kind of looking forward, what it means for artists around the world?
Absolutely. The important thing is that a lot of artists not getting royalties, either due to piracy or because of the middleman taking such a large cut. The music industry,
the intermediaries, all the dealers and brokers and people
right,
that are getting their pockets lined.
exactly. And so the problem was that in the past, I mean, you couldn't sell, say, a single listen to a piece of music, to a song, for say 5 cents or a dime, because any payment system that you tried to process that through, it would cost at least a quarter to run that transaction. And this is Visa and others. And so there's no way to run such a small transaction without it, without it costing so much. And so this NFT blockchain technology makes it possible to sell a single listen to a particular song for 5 cents, because it now costs a fraction of a penny for that transaction to take place. What happens is when we start doing blockchain transactions, you get no friction and extremely low costs. I, I, I seem to remember, I'm trying to get the number right. It was, this was a few days ago. I think it was something like $1.3 billion of Bitcoin was moved for 81 cents. That's what it cost to send $1.3 billion. Go try do that at a bank and see what they charge you.
Well, so this is let's go there. Let's talk about that, and the idea that it's in the news for several months now that the country of El Salvador has made Bitcoin a currency in the country, and
Right.
they did that because of the cost of remittances and the remittance industry. Can you go maybe for our audience and describe kind of the realities if you're an El Salvadorian and you have family in the US, and how the previous or the status quo remittance industry works? And this is global, but we'll use El Salvador as an example. and why Bitcoin changes the game entirely?
Sure. It is a well-known fact that banks exhibit what is called rent-seeking behavior. They sit there and just suck a little bit of each transaction that comes their way. And this happens from when the money is passed from one institution to the next institution to the next before it gets to the final recipient. And so you've got this chain of parasites sitting there just taking money off your transaction because they can. And that is coming to an end. And this is where banks are actually terrified, because they see the beginning of the end of their model of doing business. Sitting there with a straw sucking as money goes by is no longer a business model. So you better go find something else to do, because your business model is out the window and down the toilet. And so what happened in El Salvador is that you can now send Bitcoin to anyone living there, to their Bitcoin wallet, and they can spend it right away. They don't even need to convert it to US dollars, which is the other currency that El Salvador uses. And so there's, I guess what I should do is really finish talking about Bitcoin a little bit and why
Please.
it's, why it's so powerful. And the reason it's different is because anyone can participate. You don't have to ask permission. May I? You want to be a Bitcoin miner, you simply download the software into your machine and you start mining. You didn't ask anyone if you could do it. The software itself is open source, so and has been constantly audited. So we know that it does exactly what it says it does, and there are no back doors. And so what is mining anyway? Well, mining is a computer network that is probably in the neighborhood of 10 million computers around the world or more that processes transactions, Bitcoin transactions, every 10 minutes. So what happens is, say the transactions that occurred in Bitcoin, I sent, Bitcoin to you, you sent Bitcoin to somebody else, whatever. All those transactions are encoded in a block, encrypted. And then all of these machines get to work trying to solve the encryption problem. And there are millions of machines and everyone's working on the problem. And this is not exactly the Bitcoin algorithm, how it works, but this is a good analogy. Imagine that you've got two very, very large prime numbers, right? The basis of the cryptography is one-way functions. What that means is you can go in one direction very easily, but it's very difficult to come back. So you take two numbers, you multiply them, you get a result. Very easy to do. Take that result and try to find which two numbers multiplied together created it. Very difficult. That's why they're called one-way functions. So imagine all of these computers all over the world get going, and they're all working out what are the two primes, they're multiplying furiously one against another, the next prime, until someone has a solution. As soon as one machine figures out the solution, they publish it. The other machines that are mining stop and they look at the solution. If in fact it is correct that it is what the publisher, the publisher says it is, then it's accepted, put onto the blockchain, added to the blockchain, and the next iteration begins of finding the next block. Now, the computer that found the solution is rewarded Bitcoin, freshly minted out of thin air, out of the 21 million that will eventually come into existence. When I was mining, the reward was 50 Bitcoins every 10 minutes. After 4 years, that was cut down to 25. After the next 4 years, it was cut down to 12 and a half. Now it's 6.25. And it will continue to have every 4 years for the next 120 years, when the last Bitcoin will be minted in 2140. That is baked into the Bitcoin algorithm, cannot be changed unless everyone agrees to change it. And that is a whole other problem, because say that, we would like, look, 21 million, that's not really enough. Let's make 1 billion Bitcoins instead. So I quickly rewrite the Bitcoin algorithm and I publish it and I say, hey, here's a better one. Here's a better algorithm, because, we get more Bitcoins this way. Well, good luck, because which Bitcoin miner is going to give up this very powerful network where they're making money to adopt your idea of having a different algorithm? This actually happened in 2017 in August, when Bitcoin Cash was born. A guy called Roger Ver came up with the idea that, hey, Bitcoin transactions are too slow. The block size is only 1 megabit, and we cannot fit enough transactions. The cost of transactions is sky high. Let's create a bigger block size, and it was 8 megabits. And the software was generated, and basically the messaging went out that August the 1st, 2017, whoever wants to run this new and improved version of Bitcoin, change the algorithm in your machines, and off we go. And so it happened. Now, they were expecting to become the Bitcoin. They expected that most miners would switch over. As it turned out, most of them ignored this hard fork, as it's called, because the network went in two different directions. And so they ended up with 10% of the mining power. And so it is very difficult, because no one controls Bitcoin. It's very difficult to get any sort of consensus. And so you have the miners, you have the developers who make sure the code's good and add any improvements or whatever we're going to do. And you have the users. And so there's all of these entities all vying for influence over the Bitcoin algorithm and what we're going to do with Bitcoin next. It's like a restaurant that nobody owns. You've got chefs, you've got the owners, the managers, you've got the clients, And so, the clients say, well, I'd like to see more vegetarian offerings. And the chefs say, nah, I don't think so. And they just keep cooking what they're cooking. The managers may make a suggestion to the chefs that, please accommodate the the clients, but the miners do what they want to do. And so no one is in charge of Bitcoin. This thing runs of its own
Can
accord.
the United States government shut down Bitcoin?
So this was a concern of mine. 1 year ago at Christmas, I was in Montreal. I was visiting my kids, and I had this dream, and it was a terrible dream. Um, the dream was that Bitcoin was on fire, and it wasn't that like a rocket taking off. It was in flames. It was burning,
Yeah.
and I thought, shit, can Bitcoin be destroyed? So I couldn't sleep. I got up and I started researching, and um, in the next by the next day, I had written a paper on it. And so it turns out that the answer is no. And here's why. The size of Amazon's AWS, Microsoft's Azure Cloud, Google Cloud, all of those put together. Now, bear in mind, these clouds are general purpose computers. They compute anything. Whereas Bitcoin miners are what are called ASIC machines, application specific integrated circuits. The actual Bitcoin algorithm is baked right into the chips. That makes the machine 50 times faster than a machine that has to read and write to a hard drive. And so what happens is you get a much faster computational power if you're using ASIC machines. And that's the only way you can mine Bitcoin. Anything else would be too slow. And so if you put the entire computational power of all of this cloud services, it actually does not even come to 1% of the computing power of the Bitcoin mining network. That's how big this monster is. You cannot stop it. It is too huge. That is why it consumes so much electricity.
Now, is that bad for the planet? There's people out there hating on Bitcoin. They say it uses too much electricity.
The answer is no, and I'll tell you why. First of all, this is largely fear, uncertainty, and doubt, FUD, that is created by, those who would not wish to see Bitcoin succeed. If we really look at Bitcoin mining and where Bitcoin miners are placed, what you start to see is that the majority of them, in fact, about 75% at last count, are drawing their power from renewable sources. Why? Because it's cheaper. It's cheaper to do that than, and most Bitcoin miners are right next door to the power plant, whether it's hydro, whether it's solar, whatever. They are right next door because it costs more money to send electricity further because you lose electricity along the way. And so being right at the source is where you're going to get your cheapest electricity. And then on top of that, a lot of solar fields, when they're created, a lot of hydro isn't used at full capacity. There's a lot of spare electricity.
They pump that right into the ground, right? Typically goes unused.
Exactly. It goes unused. And so Bitcoin is actually promoting the development of renewable energy sources because we now have a 24/7 need for this power. And so it makes um, um, sustainable energy sustainable economically.
We have some questions coming in, but I only because I referenced it earlier in the show. Can you help the audience understand what is Ethereum as it relates to, maybe compare and contrast to Bitcoin?
Yeah. Okay. So there was this 16-year-old called Vitalik Buterin. He's a smart little kid. And it was, I think, 2014. He went to the Bitcoin core developers and he said, hey, I have an idea. I want to create a layer 2 solution, a platform that runs on top of Bitcoin. Can we do that? And, this is equivalent to me or you going to Visa and saying, hey, I have this great idea for a payment system that would run on top of Visa. Can I do that? And they will, laugh at you and throw you out the door, which is exactly what happened to Vitalik. They threw him out. They said, get out of here, kid. And so he said, okay, I'll write my own platform. And so he got together with a guy called Gavin Woods, Dr. Gavin Woods, and another guy called Charles Hodgkinson. And the three of them formed Ethereum. And Gavin Woods actually wrote Solidity, which is the language of smart contracts that run on the Ethereum blockchain. And this became like a world computer. You could now program money, and thus smart contracts were born, that were fully funded and with multi-signatures. The funds would go wherever they're supposed to go, and they were self-executing and non-stoppable. There is no way you can shut down a smart contract until it finishes, until it executes, and then it stops. And so this opened the door for creating contracts that didn't require lawyers. This opened the door for contracts that could not be stopped, that you couldn't you couldn't renege on. And this also created the possibility of a concept called a DAO, which is a decentralized autonomous organization. Now, this is an organization that has no people, none. It runs entirely on machine code. And you'd say, like, okay, well, what's an example of that? I mean, one possible example is rideshare with electric cars that are self-driving. And so you can create a corporation, a DAO, and it buys 100 electric cars that just drive around the city all day, accepting rides with their app, knowing where to go to get recharged, knowing where to go to get repaired, and not a person involved. It just creates money. And this has begun. DAOs are now legal in Ontario and Canada, and I'm not sure where else they have passed as legal entities. But this is the future. Totally decentralized, autonomous organizations. And listen, they are decentralized. That means the blockchain itself is decentralized. No one controls it. No one can stop it. All these computers are running. As long as the network keeps going, you cannot shut it down. You cannot serve a cease and desist order to a DAO. It continues. And so It's very interesting, the implications. And on top of that, we have completely decentralized finance is huge. This is going to be the absolutely biggest thing ever to come into our world. Decentralized finance allows us to do lending. There are things called flash loans, which are uh, fascinating constructs. Never existed before. Most of what's coming out in DeFi does not and cannot exist in the traditional finance space. The traditional financial space is a dinosaur. It's just a matter of time before it's gone because it can do not a fraction of what DeFi can do. And flash loans are amazing in that you have no need to ask any permission from anyone to borrow money. As long as your venture is successful and as long as it can be executed in one comprehensive set of steps, you get the money. Because there are these decentralized liquidity pools you can borrow from. And, you know, like if you want to do arbitrage across two exchanges and you see an opportunity, you can borrow the money to buy low, sell high, pocket the difference, and
Theo,
repay the loan.
talk about the network effect. And I'm going to say from the standpoint that, you know, telephones, when they were released and it took so long for telephones to make their way across the country, and then televisions, and then cell phones, and then the internet. And I know you went to a conference just last week and you and I were chatting and catching up on that. And you mentioned even a reference to the network effect currently observed globally as it relates to crypto. Can you speak to that and kind of what your thoughts are around that at the rate or speed of change?
Yeah. What actually came up at the crypto conference from a venture capitalist slash hedge fund manager who spoke, they said that the rate of growth of innovation on the internet when the internet first started is 1/9 of what we see in the crypto space. Crypto development innovation is going 9 times faster than innovation on the internet. That's number one. So it's exploding exponentially, of course, but 9 times more exponentially than the internet did. So what's going to happen? What's the long,
There's a question here from Taylor. He says, I'm actually going to put it on the screen. And I'll put, he says, I'd love to hear Theo's thoughts on the latest bull run. We'll get to that. But he says, how long does he see it last? Actually, you know what? It was maybe a different question. I know I scanned it over here, but Taylor asked a question, which is essentially look forward. Where is this going?
Okay. So there is a concept that's well known that is called infrastructure inversion. As an example, when the internet first started coming out, and to go back to your original comment about the telephone and the network effect, yes, telephone was a wonderful invention. However, when there was only 10 people or 100 people that had a phone, it wasn't very useful. But take the phone to millions and it starts to become useful. Take it to billions and now you got something. And similarly with the internet, when it first started, very little adoption. As it went on, we heard the stories way back that, the internet is only for criminals and pornographers and pedophiles and those. It's a fad. It'll soon go away, And some of these were respected individuals who said this. I mean, shame on them. But I don't know. if you're too entrenched, and so I see this in Bitcoin as well. And I have spoken, some of my clients are hedge fund manager, and I've spoken to them from years ago. And, they manage billions of dollars. And I've gone to them and I said, hey, what about Bitcoin? And 3 years ago, garbage. What are you talking about? That's going to zero. And so they were so entrenched. They are so entrenched that even now they're having trouble seeing it. There are the enlightened ones, though. We've got Paul Tudor Jones that brought his hedge fund on board, and he's got something like I don't know, 2 billion in Bitcoin as part of his hedge fund. We know Michael Saylor from MicroStrategies, who's a great spokesman for adoption of crypto on your balance sheet as a corporation. He's done extremely well. He got Bitcoin not last August, but the August before, August 2020.
It just came out in the last week that Tim Cook, CEO of Apple, has a personal allocation in Bitcoin. He just admitted that in an interview.
Yeah, I mean, there's very little doubt left in the institutional space that Bitcoin is a tremendous hedge with a tremendous upside that you would be foolish not to allocate some of your capital in. And we saw it with Tesla. He put 1.5 billion Bitcoin on his balance sheet, on Tesla's balance sheet. And so more and more, I understand that there are 6,000 companies now who have filed to have Bitcoin on their balance sheet and just waiting for approval. I understand the process takes some time with the SEC. It can take up to 6 months, but I think what we're going to start seeing is one company after another at an exponential pace adding Bitcoin to their balance sheet. And then we'll see Ethereum coming on board and so on. And we have just begun. I mean, just as a store of value, Bitcoin is only like a $1.3 trillion market cap. We're somewhere in that neighborhood. Gold is like about a $10 trillion market cap. I see Bitcoin surpassing gold simply because it has so many advantages over gold. It's much harder money than gold is. It's much more transferable, much more easily transferred than gold is. It has so many advantages over gold that the institutional investors are starting to get it, and even central banks are starting to look at it. And so that's the upside. And so getting back to infrastructure inversion. When the internet first came out, we all remember the dial-up modems, America Online, that whistling that was going on, and then you got mail. So what was that about? Well, that was because we were using voice lines to send data. And that was completely inefficient because it was incredibly slow. The best you could hope for was, 1,200 baud, maybe, 3,000 if you're lucky. So what happened? Infrastructure inversion.
I remember logging into a BBS board and watching a JPEG load line by line.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's all you could do if you use voice to send data. But turn that on its head, and now you have data with voice over IP on top of it, and bang, everything takes off, and we're into the megabits and gigabits. And so this is what's happening with the entire world in money and in representation on the blockchain. For instance, there is no doubt in my mind that within the next 10 years, we're going to see everything become tokenized. Real estate will become tokenized. Insurance will become tokenized. Even the stock market will become tokenized. It's just much easier to trade and much cheaper and instantaneous. And so what happens is that you can start to do things you could never do before. Like you create an NFT that represents a property, a house, whatever. And now you sell the NFT, and the NFT is traded for zero, no middleman, no banks taking their cut, no for financing, no real estate agent taking their cut. So the entire thing becomes effortless, frictionless, and very efficient. And so not only that, but say that you created 100 NFTs to represent a house, and now you sold that all over the world. Anyone can buy one of those NFTs that represent 1/100th of the value of your property. And I mean, you can work out what that means.
You could buy a fraction of a famous painting.
Exactly. There's no limits to the imagination of what can be done. But what we're looking at is a market like a stock market, which is 125 trillion, on top of a blockchain like Ethereum, running on top of Ethereum, tokenized completely. We're looking at the currencies of the world, 100 trillion worth, again, tokenized, running on top of a blockchain. We're looking at insurance, either 15 or 25 trillion dollar space, tokenized on top of blockchain network. We're looking long term at perhaps $300 trillion in market value of blockchain networks, decentralized, and I should make a distinction between what is a centralized blockchain versus a decentralized blockchain. Now, a decentralized blockchain, say that I wished to publish a fraudulent block. And again, this isn't exactly how Bitcoin works, but it's just the analogy. Say that I wish to publish a block that showed that Ron had transferred all of his Bitcoin to me.
I'd like it to work in reverse. You transfer reverse to me.
Fine.
But I don't want it to be fraudulent. I want it to be real.
So what I would do is I would change the Bitcoin algorithm just a bit, publish a fraudulent block, and I'd signal to all the other machines in the network and say, hey, got a solution right here. And they would promptly look at it and ignore it because they'd see it's bullshit. It has nothing to do with what they're doing. It's crap. And so you're just ignored. I mean, no big deal. Everyone just goes right back to work. So if you want to publish a fraudulent block, you need, because it's a consensus algorithm, you need 51% of the voting power of the network to publish your fraudulent block, which means you would need to go and find that kind of computational power to take on the Bitcoin network.
It's unattainable.
Unattainable, exactly. And so it ain't happening. It ain't happening. The only way you can shut down the Bitcoin network is shut off the internet. And if you shut off the internet, we have much bigger problems than
versus a centralized blockchain. So you were contrasting. So you just described a decentralized blockchain. Compare that to a centralized blockchain.
So I don't know if I can swear on this channel.
Well, we've already. It's all right. It's my show. Everything goes.
Okay, so a centralized blockchain is a joke. It's a joke simply because you have got a one authority or a few, a handful that can create blocks, and they can change them at will. And you don't need to use a blockchain. You can just use a database and screw around with your own database. But the point is, if you want to look cool and you want to look like you're with the times, you might say, okay, yeah, as a central bank, I am issuing a central bank digital currency. And see, here it is. Here are the wallets. Here are the accounts. And everyone's got a bank with us. And now your account exists on some central ledger. Well, the problem with that is that if someone in authority gets pissed off with you individually because you said something or you did something that they didn't agree with, it's entirely possible that they can just freeze your funds. Now you cannot transact. And so this is not possible in a decentralized way, because decentralized blockchains are public. No one has control over them. They're borderless. No one can stop you from sending from one country to another. They're neutral. Nobody cares who sends what to whom. And they're censorship resistant, because you can't say, no, you can't do that. You can't send money to that person because they live in that particular country and we don't have good relations with that country right now, so no money going there. So all that bullshit is bypassed. So it becomes very difficult for authorities to control what you do with your own money. It's a bit like cash.
Theo?
Yeah.
I have rapid fire. I'm mindful of time. We're already at our record for length of time on a show, but I have a bunch of topics that I still want you to address. So this show's going to go a little long, folks. So bear with us. But do you mind? And we'll try in a lightning round. Taylor supplied us with a bunch of questions, and I'd love to just give your replies here. I'll put them on the screen one by one. What are your thoughts on the latest bull run? All jokes aside, right now, it is all-time highs for Bitcoin and Ethereum. How long do you think this lasts? And what is your price prediction? And I'll lead the witness here for this cycle. And for those listeners, you're gonna have to study up. What does that mean, a Bitcoin cycle? What's your prediction for a Bitcoin top for this cycle?
Hard to say. There are a number of predictions in. JP Morgan Chase is, as of last week, is calling for $149,000 top for Bitcoin. The stock to flow model, which we haven't covered, which has been very accurate in the past, is calling for 200, 220. We don't know how long. I mean, it's impossible to call tops, but I expect, and this is my own personal opinion, I expect at least 100,000 at the top. And then when? Well, we are at the moment in massive supply shock. There is no Bitcoin to buy, none. Institutional investors want Bitcoin like crazy, but there's none available to buy. This is what's driving the price. And so how long will this go on, this run, this particular bull run? I would say at the very least, and until the end of this year, and quite possibly end of Q1 next year is when I would be looking to take profits and sell at least some of my Bitcoin and some of my Ethereum.
All right, I'm going to go to the next question here just to try to knock through some of them. Would also love to hear about some altcoins that he thinks is particularly interesting. We didn't really get into much altcoins. Well, we're clearly going to have to do another show, Theo. There's
Sure.
volumes of information to still cover. But I've heard good things about Matic and the Graph in particular. And, for the audience to know, there's like 10,000 plus altcoins out there. There's many, many thousands. Any high level thoughts on that?
Yeah, there are a lot of cryptocurrencies out there, and beware, 99.9% of them are crap. They are absolute garbage. Do not touch them with a 10-foot pole. The projects, it's very difficult to know what projects to buy and which to avoid. You have to do a lot of due diligence, and there's a learning curve involved in crypto. But right off the top of my head, I would say that good projects that I've looked at, the co-founder of Ethereum, Gavin Woods, left Ethereum after he created it and went and started another blockchain called Polkadot. Polkadot should be huge. I think it's undervalued at the moment. Not financial advice, but go research it. Cardano, Charles Hoskinson, the third member of the Three Musketeers of Ethereum, went and formed Cardano. Cardano is important because even though it's a slow developer, it uses functional programming. And functional programming, the actual programming language is called Haskell. The functional programming is such that you can prove mathematically that your algorithm is correct, has no bugs in it. And so it's very important when you're creating smart contracts, because as we know, some years back, someone created, Parity created a bunch of smart contracts to the tune of $140 million that got hacked. The money was lost forever. And so it's very important to be able to prove that you got no bugs in your code. And that's why Cardano is good. Polygon, Chainlink, Algorand, Tether. Never mind. Take out Tether.
Delete Tether.
Delete Tether. That's a stable coin. Don't touch that. And then I don't know, Avalanche, Elrond, Theta, Solana, Terra, not Tether. Yeah, and as I said, Chainlink, Algorand, these are all good projects. Look at them.
Love it. You gave some gold there. I know people are going to be rewinding and researching that for sure. Question here on the metaverse. What's cryptocurrency's role on the metaverse? We all heard that Facebook just changed the parent company to Meta. Facebook clearly sees a big future in the metaverse. What is the role of crypto in that space?
Well, this is where the metaverse is going to live. You know, we have projects like Sandbox and Decentraland, where you can actually buy virtual land on these projects and build virtual worlds within them. Gaming can be added to it. You can go from one space in the metaverse to the next. It's wide open.
Ready Player One, is this a real thing? For those that are listening, this is a great book and a movie by Steven Spielberg, Ready Player One. Is that what we're talking about?
We're talking about that. But we're also talking about how to monetize it so that you come out a winner rather than giving all your money to Zuckerberg, where you're not the product, but you are actually making money off of the product. And It's phenomenal where this can go. Have a look at a game called Axie Infinity. This is uh, uh, a play to earn game where you earn Axie tokens. There are countries like the Philippines where people just play this game all day because they can make like $30 a day doing it. And $30 is a lot of money in the Philippines on a daily basis. Axie Infinity is worth $9 billion. Ubisoft, which is a very large video game company, is worth $7 billion. One game is worth more than the entire company. And Electronic Arts, that's worth $40 billion market cap. And one game is almost 10, 1/4 of Electronic Arts. So this is huge. Games created on blockchain in the metaverse, but running on top of blockchains, decentralized, tons of money, all for us, the creators.
All right, I've got to ask this coin. I promise I won't make this the last question because we can't end on meme coins. But all the dog coins out there, Dogecoin, Shiba, and all the different parodies out there. How do you feel about these types of coins and their role with the future of crypto?
Very sad.
This is where 4-letter words are allowed, Theo.
Okay. These are shit coins, okay? I'll tell you why. Because take a look at Doge. Doge does nothing. It's a joke. It was a joke from the beginning. There's no development on Doge. Elon Musk took it and started tweeting about it for fun and, great. So all of these people, institutional investors, would not touch this shit with a 10-foot pole. But retail investors, they all pile in. Because what? Because Elon Musk is tweeting about it. Give me a break. This shit always happens at every bull run, and I've seen it before with ICOs during the last one.
Yep.
But they crash like crazy as soon as the bull run is over. They lose 99% of their value. So if you're going to get in, make sure you get out before the shit hits the fan. Because intrinsically, these are valueless projects. They got nothing. They have nothing to offer. There's no use case, right? And the only thing they have is a meme coin and viral marketing. But it's crap otherwise.
I agree. I want to give a shout out. Wes made a post here. He said, this was a great podcast that covered many topics, including crypto, NFTs, Web3. And he's referring to the Tim Ferriss, Naval Ravikant, and Chris Dixon show. I agree. I listened to that show, Wes. And I think I even shared that with Taylor and a few other people. I thought that was a great, it was like 2.5 hours. But it was a fantastic show. Let's close on this, Theo. Where do you go to consume your knowledge and to kind of learn? Maybe it's a 2-part question. Where do you go to learn about the crypto world? And where would you advise those that are listening that maybe are a little newer to the space? This is all maybe a little intimidating. They know it's a thing, but they don't quite fully understand it yet. What would you advise that they do? So where do you go to learn? And then where would you advise newbies that are listening where they should go to learn?
Okay, so here's the thing. Crypto, steep learning curve. You spend 100 hours studying crypto, you're now dangerous. You spend 1,000 hours studying crypto, you're just starting to get it. 10,000 hours studying crypto, you're starting to just master it. I have been in the space for a decade. I have done over 10,000 hours of research, and there's a ton of stuff I still don't know. And so it's very difficult. You got to do your due diligence. You got to consume crypto education as quickly as you can. I would point you towards Coin Bureau. Coin Bureau, I find, is brilliant with his educational platform. His name is Guy. He's a British guy, but he's very good at analysis and showing you. And he's got hundreds. He does a video every day, so he's got hundreds of videos. I would hands down advise him above anyone else I can think of in the space. I certainly have learned a lot from him. He's no nonsense, and he understands. He's smart. So there's him. And then once you start to understand, you know, go to Pompliano's podcast, Anthony Pompliano's. If you can, listen to anything you can find by Andreas Antonopoulos. He is the evangelist in Bitcoin education. He is absolutely brilliant. He actually has been invited by senators and
he spoke to Parliament in Canada. It's how Canada ended up getting a Bitcoin ETF approved before the United States.
Correct. Yep, absolutely. He's very knowledgeable and brilliant in his delivery. So I recommend him highly.
Theo, what's the future of your business, Prometheus Systems? Sounds like maybe you don't have to continue being an integrator much longer.
Yeah, I think this is my last year. I mean, I'm right now, I'm just doing it for fun. I'm going to hand it off to the younger guys on my team, let them run with it. And I'm going to go out to pasture.
Cruise off into the sunset?
I actually, I have a house in Chile that I'm thinking of going to, or I have land in Costa Rica that I'm thinking about building a house. I'm also going to build a house on the beach in the Bahamas on one of the islands. So it'll be between those three locations that you'll find me. But I'll be either in the mountains or on the beach.
Theo, you've been incredibly generous with your time and your knowledge. And this has been an awesome show, 193. Our audience that is watching or listening and they want to learn more about you or get in touch with you, perhaps, any recommended communication methods? How could they reach you?
Well, you know, I'm like a very private guy. I've been asked to, you know, start a podcast. I've never done it. I'm on radio all the time. I've even been invited to churches to give sermons on Bitcoin.
Wow.
Even when it was back at 2500, they asked me to come talk to them about Bitcoin. You imagine Bitcoin as a sermon, right?
Wow.
So I'm really, truly an evangelist in the space. I mean, you can see from my T-shirt.
Oh,
right?
yeah, look at that. That's cool.
Right? So anyway, email me.
All right. So we'll supply an email down in the show notes. So for our, do you want to describe what that email is, or do we want to just supply that afterwards?
Make it Theo Tsavoussis, all one word, at hotmail.com.
There you go. Theo, thank you for being generous with your time and your knowledge and coming on the show. It's been a blast having you on.
Thank you, Ron. It was great talking with you.
All right, folks, there you have it. That was fast and furious. As you could tell, Theo is a passionate individual, and he speaks about this subject with tremendous passion. And he's been a go-to resource for me for years around this subject. And a lot of my questions, which, I mean, a lot of them, there's almost an infinite well of questions about this stuff. It's important for you all to find your resource or find your sources of knowledge and information. I would add crypto Twitter. What does that mean? You hear this reference, crypto Twitter. Here at One Firefly, we do marketing for integrators around the world. And I've never really found a purpose for Twitter for the typical small business, even my own, perhaps. And then I discovered Twitter personally as it related to my hobby. And my hobby is cryptocurrencies. And I found that going out and listening and following thought leaders around the world has been a really tremendously valuable use of Twitter. And in fact, it's probably the best source of knowledge and information, because if you find the people that you like their position, or you listen to a podcast and then you go follow them, it just starts kind of springing from there, and you get more and more people in your network. And what's really neat is I can go on crypto Twitter now and I can see the real-time feed of all the people, all the thought leaders around the world that are passionate about this subject. And it's real-time news. I mean, it's more real-time than any other source. This podcast will hit my podcast feed a week from now, right? Sometimes great podcasters put out their content same day. But if you go out there into the social networks, and particularly Twitter, you can get it real time. I mean, as soon as someone has a thought or idea or a comment, you can grab that off Twitter. So anyway, folks, I'm going to sign off. We've gone about 20, 30 minutes here over our normal time, but I know I certainly had a blast. I hope you guys did too. This was show 193. If you have not already done so, don't forget to go to Automation Unplugged on your phone or your device and subscribe to the show. Leave us a review. And that is always greatly appreciated. And signing off, and I will see you all next week. Thanks, everybody.